Have you ever wondered why some people always seem to win without ever raising their voice or revealing their strategy? They don't demand attention, they don't compete for the spotlight, yet somehow they always seem to come out ahead. That's not an accident. It's intelligence guided by invisibility. In a world obsessed with visibility, Stoicism teaches us the opposite. What's hidden is often what holds the most power. You've been told to speak your truth, show your process, be seen to be respected. But what if being seen is the very reason you keep getting outmaneuvered? Because once they see how you think, they learn how to control your next move. The Stoics understood this well. True power lies in restraint, not revelation. The ones who outsmart the crowd don't play louder, they play wiser. They don't react, they read. And then when the time is right, they move with precision no one saw coming. Stay with me. What you're about to hear might just shift the way you think about power, presence, and how to win without ever making a sound. 1. Move without being mapped. There's a quiet kind of intelligence that never announces itself. It doesn't wear titles, it doesn't crave applause, and yet it bends reality in its favor without needing to speak. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles." But what he never had to say, what he only ever implied, is that the most dangerous men never need a title at all. They walk through life like shadows at noon, subtle, overlooked, but impossible to contain. The Stoics didn't teach us to hide in fear. They taught us to walk through life with discretion, with discipline, with the kind of quiet strength that doesn't perform, doesn't explain, and doesn't tremble at misunderstanding. When Marcus Aurelius said, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have," he was pointing at a truth many forget. Power begins where noise ends. Think of the lion, loud, majestic. You hear it roar before you see it. Its presence commands respect, but it also draws every eye in the savannah. You admire the lion, but you always know where it is. Now think again. What does the lion fear? Not the elephant, not the hyena. The lion fears the serpent, silent, subtle. It doesn't declare war, it doesn't issue threats. By the time you notice it, it's already beneath your feet. This is the art of invisibility, not as cowardice, but as strategy, not as fear, but as form. In a world addicted to visibility, the rarest currency is mystery. Men today overshare their intentions. They announce their dreams. They narrate their every emotion. Every thought is turned into a post, every ambition into a video. Transparency, once a noble principle, has become a liability. You tell the world how you think. You express what you want, what you fear, what you plan. And then you're surprised when your moves are anticipated, intercepted, even mocked. But here's a question that might change the way you carry yourself. If you walk into a room and everyone already knows your thoughts, your limits, your desires, what power do you really have? None. You've become predictable, and predictability is the first step toward being powerless. The Stoic doesn't hide because he is afraid. He withholds because he is focused. He knows that the man who broadcasts his thoughts surrenders control of them. The man who must always speak doesn't know how to listen. And the man who constantly explains himself has forgotten the value of mystery. I once met a man who taught me this not through words, but through presence. He wasn't a public figure, no spotlight, no corporate logo. But he ran an empire from the back of a small cafe. Dressed simply, quiet voice, ordered tea. And yet the most powerful people in the city came to him, not because he shouted, but because he never needed to. Not because he declared authority, but because he carried it in silence. That's the paradox. When you don't seek approval, people crave your opinion. When you don't rush to explain, they lean in. When you don't react, they fear your stillness. This is what I call the mirror effect. Give people nothing and they project everything. And it works, not because it's manipulative, but because it returns control to its rightful place, within. Let them think you're slow. Let them believe you're soft. Let them assume you don't know what they know. Because in that underestimation lies your greatest advantage. The moment someone believes they have you figured out, they stop preparing for what you're actually capable of. They train for a version of you that never existed, and while they practice during the day, you move at night. While they rehearse conversations, you study silences. While they prepare to dominate the spotlight, you reshape the room before the lights even turn on. Let me give you something you can carry with you, a small but powerful image. Imagine two warriors. One walks into the arena, sword raised, crowd cheering. The other stands in the shadows, watching. The first makes noise, the second takes notes. The first is bold, visible, celebrated, but the second waits. He doesn't attack when the crowd watches. He strikes when the other forgets the battle is still on. The Stoic chooses this second path. He doesn't withhold himself out of insecurity. He does it out of discipline. He doesn't need to impress the crowd. He is governed not by attention, but by aim, because true power does not need to be seen to be felt. It does not need to be loud to be lasting. The Stoics knew that when you are quiet, you own your energy. When you are still, you choose your battlefield. And when you don't explain, no one can use your truth against you. In today's world, men are encouraged to narrate their every moment. Document your life. Share your goals. Tell the world who you are, what you feel, what you fear. But when you give them your mind, they will use it to control your direction. When you share your strategy, they'll use it to outmaneuver you. And when you perform your soul, they'll rewrite the script. That's why the Stoic keeps certain things sacred, his principles, his plans, and his pace. He doesn't ask for applause. He doesn't need it. His reward is mastery over himself. The goal is not to be known. The goal is to be effective. It's easy to speak when everyone else is silent. It's harder to stay silent when everyone else is shouting. But that's the test of self-command. And in that silence, you become magnetic. Not because you chase respect, but because you no longer need it. So what do you do when the world begs you to speak, to post, to reveal, to confess? You smile. You stay grounded. You protect the parts of you that don't need to be explained. Because in a world of exposure, what you withhold becomes your throne. Let them wonder, let them guess, let them prepare for the wrong version of you, and while they plan for what they see, you build from what they'll never expect. If you're still with me, you're already walking a different path, a path that doesn't require recognition to be valid. A path that teaches you to be more than what you show. Because the Stoic doesn't win through noise, he wins through necessity. His actions are rare but deliberate. His silence is not absence, it's presence sharpened into focus. So if you wish to outsmart everyone, don't out-talk them, don't outperform them, outweight them, out-observe them. And most of all, outgrow their need for attention. Be like the serpent, the one they never hear coming, the one they can never quite explain, the one whose silence is the loudest thing in the room. Now take that image, that presence, that stillness, and carry it into every room you enter. Because when the world knows nothing of your next move, that is when you truly hold all the power. And this is only the beginning. 2. Hold power in silence. Let me say it clearly, and say it as a Stoic would say it, not with fire, but with focus. Concealment is not weakness. It is strength trained in restraint. Deception, when used not to harm but to protect, is not dishonor. It is self-governance. It is defense. The Stoic understands this well. He does not throw his thoughts into the wind hoping someone will understand them. He guards them, shapes them, uses them with intention, not for attention. Machiavelli was not a man who glorified cruelty. He was a man who studied reality. He saw what happened to the predictable, the exposed, the loud. He understood that the more visible you are, the easier it becomes to strike you. And what is predictability, if not a roadmap for your enemies? You live in a time when every urge is to be seen. Post your dream, share your plan, announce your wound, confess your doubt. And you believe you are inspiring others. But what if you are only arming them with a detailed map of your internal world, arming them with your fears, your routines, your hopes, arming them with everything they need to stop you before you even begin? The Stoics warned against this, not because vulnerability is evil, but because indiscriminate expression is unwise. Seneca said, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." But he also said, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." Knowing when to speak and when to be still is the first step toward mastery. So let me ask you a hard question, one that requires more than honesty. It requires clarity. Do you seek connection more than you seek control? Because if you do, you will spend your life feeding a crowd that applauds you with one hand and hides a blade in the other. You will be surrounded, yes, celebrated, maybe, but you will also bleed, often silently. The man who chooses self-command walks alone more often. He isn't always understood, but he walks with his blood intact. He walks with his will unshaken. That's the trade. Applause or autonomy, noise or navigation. We are told today that silence is repression, that restraint is weakness, that sharing is growth. But the Stoic knows better. The man who has power over himself does not need to share every detail of his soul. He chooses stillness, not because he's afraid to speak, but because he knows the weight of every word. He doesn't react to the world. He shapes how the world reacts to him. This is the art of influence without performance. The strategist does not announce his strategy. He doesn't explain himself to strangers. He lets outcomes speak in silence. He withholds, not because he is unsure, but because he is building. He is engineering not responses, but responses in others. He studies patterns. He reads the room, not to impress it, but to understand it. And then, when the moment is right, he moves, not to be seen, but to shift the entire structure. Let me show you a real example of this. Years ago, I met a man named Elias. He worked in a high-level corporate environment filled with voices competing for recognition. People wrote long emails to seem busy. They showed up early to be seen, stayed late to be praised. Elias did none of this. He sat at meetings, rarely spoke. When he did, it was brief, sharp, final. He never explained his value. He never bragged about his experience. And yet, every time something fell apart, people turned to him. I asked him once why he never fought to be noticed. He said, "Because if you have to tell them you're valuable, you're not." That sentence stuck with me. That was Stoic in nature. The idea that your presence should carry weight, not your performance. The idea that your words should be few, but your actions undeniable. It is not mystery for the sake of seduction. It is silence as armor. It is invisibility as independence. The Stoic doesn't fear being misunderstood. He understands that the more people believe they understand you, the more power they have over you, so he gives them nothing. Not to confuse them, but to stay free. When you walk into a room and say nothing, and yet everyone turns, ask yourself why that happens. It's not because they fear your noise, it's because they sense your self-mastery, because you do not flinch, because you do not reach, because you do not beg. That silence tells them something they cannot decode, and people fear what they cannot name. A man like this does not rise by accident. He rises through preparation, discipline, and the refusal to be predictable. He doesn't broadcast. He becomes. He doesn't chase power. He becomes too still to be manipulated, too intentional to be used. And when he speaks, it's not for impact. It's because something needed to be said. This man is like fog. He enters unnoticed, shifts everything, and leaves you wondering if he was ever really there. He is like the wind, gentle but capable of turning the course of ships. You cannot see his plans, but you feel them. You adjust to them. You follow them, whether you mean to or not. In a world of spectacle, subtlety becomes a superpower. In a world of noise, stillness becomes thunder. So I ask you again, as a Stoic would, who are you trying to impress? Every time you act to please someone else, to gain their nod, their approval, their validation, you give away a piece of your power, and you will not get it back. Power does not live in what is seen. It lives in what is sensed, but never confirmed. It's like a cold wind before a storm. You can't trace its source, but you feel something is shifting, something unexplainable, something that commands without demanding. This is what we aim for. The kind of presence that doesn't scream, but transforms. That doesn't argue, but shifts the conversation. That doesn't seek to be understood, but remains consistent in virtue and unshakable in focus. Seneca once warned, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." The same is true of your energy. If everyone knows your pain, your plan, your next step, you belong to them, not to yourself. So let them wonder, let them guess. Let them reach for a version of you they can't grasp, because the moment they think they've figured you out, you've already moved on. You've already changed direction. You've already won. Be like Elias. Be like the wind. Speak only when the silence is no longer enough. And above all, never explain what you can demonstrate. Never confess what you can transcend. Never reveal what you can refine. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming clear. This is not about hiding your soul. It is about protecting your foundation. This is not about withdrawing from the world. It is about entering it on your own terms. So, when the world pushes you to speak, to share, to announce, choose stillness, choose discipline, choose the kind of silence that echoes longer than any applause. And with that silence, we sharpen the blade, because what comes next requires even more precision, even more presence, even more control. Let's keep going. 3. Let them misread you. There's a dangerous assumption that many people carry without realizing it, the belief that visibility equals understanding, that because they've seen your posts, watched your habits, laughed at your stories, they've somehow deciphered your essence. But the Stoic knows better. He knows that seeing is not knowing, that surface is not substance. The strategist never lets the map reflect the territory. He lets them draw their charts, mark their conclusions, feel secure in their assumptions, while he quietly builds where no one is looking. Let them think the castle is behind the gate, while you build it behind the mountain. Let them prepare for a battle that will never come, while the real war is already being won in silence. This is the Stoic principle of controlled misdirection, not deception out of fear, but redirection out of wisdom. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. You don't move to impress. You move to outmaneuver. You become the servant while you're the master. You play the fool while orchestrating the game. You reveal a crack and let them think they've seen the foundation. But they haven't. They've only seen what you allowed, and that illusion is your first weapon. Understand this. Intelligence alone does not make you untouchable. Charm, cleverness, insight, none of it matters if it's not protected by discipline. A sword, no matter how sharp, is useless without the patience to wait for the opening. The true Stoic weapon is not knowledge, it's restraint. The self-control to listen while others boast. The courage to be underestimated. The ability to strike not when provoked, but when the silence has become too heavy to ignore. Picture this. You're in a crowded room. Everyone's talking, pitching, proving, shouting to be heard. You're quiet. Not because you lack something to say, but because you've already read the room. You're studying their weaknesses, their tells, their thirst. The dog that barks does not bite. The man who speaks too much is rarely the one to fear. But the one who listens, the one who observes, that's the man they never see coming. Machiavelli wrote, "He who seeks to deceive will always find someone willing to be deceived." But his truest strength was in something subtler. He didn't deceive with lies. He deceived with design. He revealed just enough, one gesture, one story, one opinion, to make you believe you had the full picture. But what you saw was only a silhouette. The true form was hidden beneath layers. And by the time you thought you understood him, he had already moved on. Most people will trade everything, clarity, control, even integrity, for the illusion of connection. They will speak just to be heard, reveal just to be accepted. But in doing so, they hand over the only currency that truly matters, unpredictability. And once someone can predict you, they can prepare for you. Once they can prepare, they no longer need to fear. So what do? You become the unknown. You let them fill in the blanks. You let them talk about you, speculate, invent narratives, because you gave them nothing to speak about face to face. And by the time they realize they were never part of your true design, the decision has already been made. The game already finished. The throne already claimed, not in noise, but in silence. Not in debate, but in precision. Let me tell you a story. A real one. There was a Roman general who never stepped into the front lines, not because he feared the sword, but because he understood the terrain. While his enemies trained in battle formations, he studied their water supply. While they polished weapons, he intercepted their food. When they waited for the trumpet, he let hunger make the first cut. By the time they realized where the real war was, it was already over. That is strategy. That is restraint in action. But here's where most men fail. They confuse silence with weakness. They think restraint is avoidance. They mistake stillness for indecision. But they forget the coiled spring looks harmless too, until it snaps. You must cultivate that pressure, that quiet force. That subtle tension that makes people wonder what you're thinking because they can't read you. And people don't fear noise. They fear unreadable stillness. This is not about being cold or distant. This is about being ungraspable. You walk into a room, you smile, you nod, you shake hands, but you give nothing away. No opinions unless invited. No stories unless tactical. No truths unless sharpened for purpose. And when they leave, they remember you, not because you performed, but because they couldn't explain you. And that is power. The world is addicted to noise. But your edge is stillness. They rush, you wait. They announce, you calculate. They chase presence, you command it. You are not absent, you are observing. You are not uncertain, you are watching them confuse themselves. Because the man who reveals nothing controls everything. Let them burn themselves in the pursuit of attention. Let the loud ones race to the spotlight. Let the critics argue over shadows. You remain still, and in that stillness they project fear, doubt, power. Because the mind fills the silence with imagination, and imagination can be more dangerous than truth. But silence alone is not the weapon. It's the sheath. The blade is your mind. You're not just withholding, you're orchestrating. You're not just waiting, you're watching. Collecting rhythms, exposing flaws, mapping patterns. You let others feel they've won, your time, your attention, your trust. But every word they heard was planted, every reaction rehearsed, every moment designed. The Stoic strategist becomes a mirror. He reflects, he absorbs, he returns nothing until the moment arrives. Say little, and people reveal themselves. Remain calm, and they unravel. Show composure, and their chaos becomes the spotlight. They do not fear your noise, they fear your restraint. Think of power like a hallway with two doors. One is open, bright, loud. People rush in. The other is quiet, shadowed, closed. Few pause to consider it. But the ones who do, the thinkers, the tacticians, the leaders, they always choose the second door. Because real power doesn't compete. It waits. It doesn't broadcast. It decides. And now, here's what you must understand. Your appearance is not your truth. It is your shield. Your smile is not surrender. It's structure. Your openness is not exposure. It's a design. Keep your true hand hidden, your ambition, your plans, your full strength. Because once they see all of you, they can prepare. But if they see only what you let them, they prepare for a version that doesn't exist. Let them expect fire and become fog. Let them train for war and win with silence. Let them watch your feet while you rewrite the path. You don't speak unless it shifts position. You don't reveal unless it creates confusion. You don't move unless it forces recalibration. And in doing so, you become uncatchable, not by running, but by disappearing into the role no one could define. One day, helpful. The next, unreadable. One day open. The next, absent. They don't know what you are, ally, rival, observer. That is your power. Not in dominance, but in design. Most people play the game. Some try to cheat the game. But the Stoic strategist, he writes new rules. He speaks a language no one else hears. And that's who you are now. The silent rewriter of outcomes. The one who doesn't need the room but owns it anyway. If you've stayed with me until now, drop a simple comment below. Unseen. And if you felt something shift in you today, subscribe. Not because I said so, but because you're building something that doesn't need to be seen to be unstoppable. Let's go deeper. 4. When stillness strikes. There comes a moment when silence stops being passive and becomes motion, the phase they never expect. You've been still, you've been unreadable, you've let the world assume you were dormant, passive, safe, and that was the plan. Because the Stoic doesn't just train in the open, he prepares in shadows. He waits not out of fear, but out of wisdom. The strategist studies the terrain while others charge in blind. He lets the world tire itself out on noise while he sharpens his presence in silence. Timing for the Stoic is not a matter of luck, it is a form of power. Most people act when they feel ready, when their emotions swell, when the crowd is watching. But the man who moves only when it serves his aim understands a deeper law, that the delayed action, placed with precision, carries more impact than 100 rushed reactions. Think of the wolf. It does not pounce at the first sign of weakness. It watches. It learns the patterns. It waits until the terrain, the wind, the attention of the prey all shift in its favor. Then, and only then, it strikes. Not with rage, but with inevitability. The strike is silent. The aftermath is total. That's how the Stoic acts. He doesn't let the world provoke him into premature motion. He lets underestimation become a weapon. He allows others to feel superior. He listens. He lets them give advice, finish their sentences, assume control, all while calculating the pivot point. Then, one single move, deliberate, clean, undeniable, and everything changes. This isn't about acting 10 times. It's about acting once with full command. You don't need applause. You need position. And position is earned in the quiet moments. In restraint, in calculation. Machiavelli called this virtue, not virtue in the moral sense, but in the sense of personal force, command, strength applied with timing. The kind of strength that can change the course of events, not through noise, but through discipline. Most men are too reactive to be strategic. They move fast, speak often, and burn through opportunities they never saw clearly. But you've held, you've waited, you've built in silence, and now you begin to emerge. Not completely, just enough. A subtle move here, a shift in tone there. Suddenly, the room bends, not because you announced your power, but because they feel it. This is the second phase of power. The shift from unreadable to undeniable. You no longer need to hide, because now every word you say is placed with surgical intent. You don't shout. You lower your voice and everyone leans in. You don't chase attention. You become gravity. You speak once and the system reorganizes around you. This is when the world recalibrates. When your silence, once seen as neutrality, becomes something heavier, charged, and no one can explain why. They just know something has changed. That's the moment you no longer seek control. You set the rhythm. And once you've established that rhythm, the Stoic does something unexpected. He disappears again, not to run, but to rule. Because true power doesn't linger, it echoes. When the world begins to reflect your values, your standards, your tone, you no longer need to be present. You become presence. Your absence grows louder than your speech ever could. And that is the final evolution of silence. It becomes legacy. Every great strategist must face a temptation at the peak of their rise, the urge to bask, to speak, to be known. But the wisest among them resist it. They know that the longer you stay in the arena, the more arrows will fly. The one who exits at his peak becomes legend. The one who lingers becomes target. So you vanish again, not out of fear, but to let your impact mature without interference. Your fingerprints remain, your decisions still ripple, but your form unseen. Mystery sustains power longer than any performance. The world forgets noise. It remembers shadows. You don't need to publish your blueprint. You don't need to give interviews explaining your methods. Let them speculate. Let them write books about your silence. Let them mistake your absence for enigma, because they never truly understood what you were doing. And that was the point. You were never here for applause. You were here to change how the game is played by refusing to acknowledge the rules. Let them imitate. Let them praise. Let them criticize. None of it matters, because you've already begun building the next thing, quietly, somewhere else. Think of the Roman Senate, a stage of speeches, declarations, performances. But behind the curtain, one man, silent, strategic. He sent a letter at the right time, whispered to the right ear, and entire regions changed hands. That was true influence, not public, operative. And once you've tasted that, once you've seen the results of unspoken strategy, you never go back to performance. You become something else. The Stoic architect, the man who speaks with timing, who acts without noise, who lets others write his legend while he sketches the next empire in silence. So what does this mean in our world today? It means you no longer announce your intentions. You act and let time speak for you. It means you no longer debate the unwise. You let results disprove them. It means you don't explain your growth. You live it and let others adjust their opinions alone. You become not the player, but the architect. Your silence is no longer a strategy. It is your language. Your absence no longer signals distance. It signals design. They will walk into rooms where you are not, but your influence will speak from the walls. They will feel your imprint in decisions they make. They will try to ignore you, but find themselves pausing at every turn, asking, what would he say? What would he do? This is no longer mystique, it is necessity. You are now part of their framework, not because you forced your way in, but because your presence has become essential. And the most poetic part, if you've done this well, they'll never even know they lost. They'll believe they chose this path. They'll think it was their idea. But you planted that seed a year ago, and now it blooms. This is not manipulation. It is mastery, not domination, design. You didn't need to overpower anyone. You simply saw further, moved earlier, and spoke less. By the time they woke up, the board had changed. The pieces were new, and the crown they thought they wore now serves your empire. No noise, no spectacle, only silence. 5. Be the quiet standard. Now we close the circle. You've watched in silence while others performed for attention. You've listened without reacting, even when every part of the room demanded your voice. You've withheld what they were desperate to see, not out of pride, but out of principle. You moved, not for applause, but in alignment with your purpose. And in doing so, you've done something most men never achieve. You've rewritten the rules simply by refusing to play their game. Each silence you held wasn't emptiness, it was presence. Each action you chose wasn't for display, it was precision. You've become what unsettles others, not because you intended to, but because they don't know how to read a man who doesn't explain himself. The world teaches performance, encourages confession, rewards exposure. But the Stoic strategist declines. He stands just out of reach, just beyond understanding, just silent enough to shift the room without needing to enter it loudly. This is not detachment, it is design. When they seek your emotion, you respond with composure. When they ask for explanation, you offer absence. When they try to predict you, you change the pattern. You become the element they cannot calculate, the principle they are forced to adapt to. And that is the final transformation. You are no longer just a man in the room. You are now a presence that echoes beyond it. You've replaced effort with quiet efficiency, visibility with force, movement with weight. You no longer chase victory. You've become the form it takes. No declarations, no slogans, just quiet, undeniable rule. This is no longer about tactics. This is about transformation, when silence stops being a strategy and becomes your nature. If you value quiet power over loud noise, subscribe now. The next move is yours. Make it in silence.